High on Life Game Review, Toxic Shooter. Finally, the title High on Life was released after its interesting and funny shows, and today we are going to review this game. Be with us. If you've been following video game news lately, you've definitely noticed the funny trailers released by High on Life. Developed by Justin Roiland, the creator of the popular series Rick and Morty and Solar Opposites, it was finally published with the slogan "By Gamers, for Gamers." But can High on Life be as interesting as Rick and Morty, or does Squanch Games not yet have enough experience to create fun and interesting games? High on Life begins with a smart start, taking the silly yet engaging storyline and engaging the gamer eagerly by raising even sillier questions. I don't know how to explain the story of the game so that you will believe it, but it seems that in the world of High on Life, humans are the strongest drugs for aliens. In short, these aliens attack the Earth and plan to use these two-legged Earths to produce drugs. What is our role in this? We are in the role of a gamer who accidentally finds a strange space gun belonging to a space race called Gatlians. Kenny, who is the first weapon in the game, guides you to steal a special object from the spaceship, and after a short fight, you are teleported to another planet with your sister Lizzie and your home. Now, in this way, you will meet a homeless bounty hunter named Gene, who is ready to give you all his supplies in exchange for living in your house. Simply put, you become a space bounty hunter and must kill the G3 cartel members one by one to finally set things right. I should say from the beginning that the narrative and the story of the interesting and humorous game that is in its plot is similar to the humor of Rick and Morty. The game uses every single moment to make the audience laugh and does not fail to surprise them when they reach different goals. The game's jokes are not dissimilar to Roiland's animations, but they have more or less their own independent characteristics, and Roiland has done a good job of implementing these jokes in the form of a game. Even listening to the conversations of two completely normal NPCs during the game can entertain you. Every single creature you see in the game, they have different and special characters, and they are not the smallest creatures in the game that are only used as fillers and space fillers. But does the game perform perfectly in this section? The answer to this question is negative. Roiland, despite placing his own attractive characters and surprises, has done little in some parts, and the laziness of the game makers is quite evident in some parts. Do you remember the funny knife and of course bad mouth that we have seen many times in the published shows of his game? I dare to say that except for the first 15 minutes and when separating the DNA of the boss fights of the game, no sound comes out of him and he practically turns into a normal knife. If the potential of this character was more than this, and he could have very funny moments in Make a Game. This more or less applies to the rest of the Gatlians we find throughout the game, and most of the conversations and dialogues in the game are on Kenny's shoulders. However, if you are a fan of Roiland's works, High on Life will surprise you at least in the story department, and the presence of things like a TV with programs similar to Rick's famous interdimensional receiver will entertain the gamer. Tired, incomplete, and inadequate. But the defects of the game and of course the insufficient experience of the creators have created problems that we will discuss further. During the story, you get access to 5 different weapons, each with its own characteristics. Unfortunately, the game does not force the player to use all weapons, except for the platforming stages that require the capabilities of these weapons, and due to the unlimited ammunition of each, you can finish all the battles without changing weapons and only using Kenny. Deliver. The gameplay itself is fascinating, and in the first few minutes, shooting enemies and delivering final blows by knifey is enjoyable. However, after a few minutes of experiencing the stages, due to the severe lack of variety of enemies that reaches less than the fingers, the game becomes repetitive and tires the player. The most important factor for a game with the style of High on Life is to present challenging stages and use diverse and of course stubborn and attractive enemies, which unfortunately the creators have not considered these things in any way. The game has 3 different degrees of difficulty, which in the first case, practically does not create any challenge. The second and third modes also make the game a little more challenging. The creators have tried to compensate for this lack of variety in the fighting section by providing platforming sections, various minigames, and a series of very few environmental puzzles. The quality of the environmental puzzles is good, but the creators used them very few times. For example, in one of the stages of the game, a 3D puzzle similar to the water pipe puzzle is considered, which is repeated 3 times and can entertain the player. Among the mini-games, we can mention button pressing. In a part of the game, you have to enter the office of a member of G3, pretend to be one of its employees and start the infiltration operation. In the meantime, you will be given a series of forms that will be done in the form of a button pressing game. One of the problems of this section is the small number of them during the game. In short, despite its initial appeal, the game becomes boring in the end, and the jokes and sudden events bear the main burden of the work's appeal, and after the first half of the story, the gameplay repeats itself and no longer has its initial value. High on Life has a beautiful world. It is not big, but its beauty will attract you. The environmental diversity of each of the game's planets is acceptable, and finally, although the number of these planets is still not large, it keeps the gamer satisfied. Urban and forest environments have acceptable quality and diversity visually. In general, the main environments of the game can be divided into forest, desert and city sections, each of which visually has its own characteristics and environmental hazards, but it is interesting to know that except for NPCs, the enemies of the game are still the same in all these sections. Leaving aside the beauties of the game, we come to one of the biggest problems of High on Life. The game is so technically difficult that it seems the creators have spent all their time designing jokes and dialogues for NPCs and space guns. From small bugs and problems such as ripping the character when using the zipline and various enemies and even yourself falling into the ground, to bigger problems that force you to restart or even correctly delete, your save files completely. The problems do not end here. Suppose 2 of the NPCs in the game are having a conversation and you are attracted to listen to their fascinating conversations until the end. In short, these 2 decide to leave that place together and go to the cinema. However, in the path you follow these 2, after they move a few steps, they are teleported to the same place before your eyes and start all these dialogues from the beginning. Isn't it strange? Now that you are ready to release your excitement by sticking the trigger of the gun on the enemies, you notice that a very irrelevant and sometimes nerve-wracking music plays for you and forces you to run towards the enemies with its not-so-pleasant rhythm. Shoot for the 1000th time you see during the game. Even if we consider the music as a matter of taste, still the quiet tracks become very repetitive during the exploration of the environment and do not have any variety, and on the other hand, sometimes the music is not exciting during the battles and you have to continue the battle with the same track dedicated to the exploration of the environment. Justin Roiland once again manages to handle the characters of Knifey and Kenny well, and although we have heard these voices before in the role of Rick and Morty, there is still an originality and charm in the jokes of these characters. In addition to Roiland, other characters in the game also have good voices, and the player can easily communicate with these characters and enjoy listening to their conversations. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and wait for our videos. Goodbye, friends.